Hello, everyone. On behalf of the Foundation for Non-Duality, we welcome you to the inaugural Non-Dual Roundtable discussion, where we, a panel of Jason Schulman's senior students and teachers, discuss the interface between ideas about non-duality and our daily lives. We are excited to be here with you. As you may or may not know, the Foundation for Non-Duality is dedicated to making the principles of non-dual thinking and practice, as articulated by Jason Schulman, available to the greater public for the purpose of transforming the consciousness of individuals in order to help alleviate suffering in the world. These principles and their practical application focus on the unitive connection between personal and transcendent consciousness as the foundational basis for change and healing. Jason Schulman sees the study of non-duality, especially in its practical applications in everyday living, as part of the healing of the human soul. The aim is to live our lives as both healing and healthy individuals who are aware of and connected to the entire web of being, including the totality of who we are. Living the totality of our being means including all of our human parts in our awareness, from our great courage and longing to connect to our many imperfections that work against these aims. Jason Schulman's teachings are based on kindness toward the self and others, and the work of the foundation is to actualize this kindness in everyday life. If you don't know Jason Schulman, over the past 40 years of teaching, he has worked to reconcile the deistic or relative paths of liberation with the consciousness of Buddhism and other non-theistic paths to create a truly non-dual path of healing, one that does not exclude any aspect of reality. His work emphasizes the healing of the personal ego and its rightful place in any path that seeks liberation from ignorance and the awakening of compassion. It also seeks to bring the human world, with its imperfections, into alignment with the realization of transcendent awareness. In this way, we develop a conscious awakening to the sacredness of every sentient being and every time-bound moment. So what we want to do here today is invite conversation, a dialogue, and there will be time for audience interaction. We would love for you to participate with questions and comments. And this first series is titled Living in a Time of Conflict, and it's based on Jason's essay, The Value of War. I'm joined by Beth Almarini, Damon Farnham, and Summer Ajami. My name is Tim Rothschild, and I'll be moderating today's conversation. So now I'd like to open it up to my fellow students and teachers with a question. What does a non-dual approach to conflict actually look like, and how can we live it? Anybody can just jump in.
Yeah, I was thinking, Tim, of course, our topic is about conflict, but I thought we could have just one step backward. I would like to highlight something very important because Jason emphasizes throughout his work the fact that it's how important it is for us to know that we are in an imperfect world and that we are imperfect and that we will always be, and that we should be okay with that. I mean, it feels like a very simple statement, but I think throughout our life, we never seem to be okay with our imperfection. And so because of this statement, it feels like we need a radical departure from our usual way of thinking and experiencing the world. Because the fact is that our reality is shaped by our perspective of it. It's how we think of it. So then here comes your question about the non-dual perspective of conflict. And I know if I start with this, it's going to kind of push certain buttons because of what's happening in the world right now. But the truth is that conflict is really a feature of the world, of life, of the universe, and the way that throughout, like the non-dual perspective of it, it looks at it as a kind of creative process that allows for new relationships to happen, allows for new paradigms to begin. And this has to be fundamentally first with ourselves and then with others and the world. So this kind of invites us to have a more productive meeting with conflict. It feels like from this place, it can open a dialogue amongst each other about our shared human condition. So this would be a very different dialogue of how we can approach conflict, because we all share our struggles and pains and from our daily conflicts, but to have this broader perspective of how conflict exists to start with is like in life, and how can it be nutritious to us. This is, I think, going to be amazing approach to really look into the specificities and the details of conflict.
So if I'm hearing you right, it sounds like at least a part of this is we need to give a place for conflict in a new way in our lives so that we can start to have a new relationship to it.
Absolutely. Because go ahead, David.
Just as you're talking, you're kind of inspiring some thoughts for me that particularly when people pursue spiritual paths, it's very common sometimes for people to feel like conflict is something that we can get rid of. That if we come from an open-hearted approach, that if we love, if we do things in the right way somehow, if we have the right kind of relationship with ourselves, that somehow this is something that we can get rid of. And there's this concept in the world. And so it sounds like what you're proposing and this work is proposing is that, in fact, conflict is a feature of our world. And you're even going further and saying that it can be nutritious, that it can actually add value in some ways. And I think this is a really important point because it's very easy to want to get rid of it. And I think that we'll talk about that more in that impulse to get rid of it. It can kind of devolve into more destructive states. But that if we instead change the way that we're relating to it and we're saying, no, this could actually be this is a valuable part of life that's always here, like with organisms and the way that they interact. It could be, two people in a relationship who are trying to work out the needs that they have with each other, that they can seem conflicting, but really it's almost like a negotiation. It can be on all these different levels, conflicting ideas. And it can be really productive, instead of this feeling that there should be some idealized state where we're able to get rid of it completely.
I think that's a really important point, right? I think we all have these ideas of what peace actually looks like, or what an enlightened state actually looks like. And sometimes it doesn't include some necessary features of the world, like this new place that we're exploring with, how conflict can actually be nourishing to us. So can somebody speak to, what that might look like? How can we actually get nourishment from conflict? How does that actually work?
I think that if we allow conflict its proper place, that we accept it as what it is, a part of life, just that acceptance right there starts a whole journey, a whole other way of relating. And of course it's nutritious. How could it not be? When we're in conflict with ourselves or with one another, and we're able to look at it and actually deal with it instead of running or hoping, thinking it shouldn't be there. We learn so much about ourselves, about one another. It's actually an opportunity that really too many of us miss. and too many of us let just sort of fly by without really deeply looking and accepting.
Yeah, and you know, Beth, listening to you also makes me wonder about how much each of us is willing to meet these conflicts within ourselves. So it's really to know that within me, to know each of us, to know the maybe self-hatred, self-sabotage, the confusion, the stress, the arrogance, whatever is here. If I'm willing, if each of us is willing to meet these conflicting parts within ourselves, then what happens is that if we can give them a location, the idea that just like to name them, to really bring them to our awareness, what happens here is that more of me becomes available, paradoxically, because where these parts would go if I'm not bringing them back home. I mean, where are they gonna go? They're the parts of us that keep knocking at the door, that wrecks our nervous system moment to moment. So when we bring them back home, when we're bringing all this life force back home, including every aspect of ourselves, then there's more. That's what we think of as a full human being that restores our humanity. That then when more of me is available in this way, I can be more trustworthy. I can be more safe. Why? Because I'm more real. Because what the world needs from us is to be real. When we're all real in our interactions, and first, everything that happens in the world, we need to bring it back to ourselves, our feeling about it, our thinking about it, and giving it place. And from there, the interaction, the relationship is more authentic, is more intimate.
So you talking about bringing this home reminds me of Rumi's poem, The Guest House. And like the last lines of it, be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. So who really wants to turn away a guide from beyond? I don't. Although I will say, kind of on another part of this, is for people who have been raised in families where conflict equals violence, it can be very hard to let those parts of you come home and to acknowledge them and not run from them.
Beth, I think that's I think it's a really, really important thing that you bring in. Is that we can talk about this, and we can talk about meeting these places inside of us. Our difficulties, our anxiety, our self-doubt, our self-judgment, and as hard as these things are, we can work with them. They are accessible to a lot of people. And then you start to talk about things that can be really, really hard to access inside of us, and the things that we really feel like shouldn't be there. In fact, it can feel like it's completely unacceptable that they're there. And then so we can start to talk about, like, how do you value these things? How do you give these things a place? How do you feel like you can safely kind of open the door and start to build a relationship with the unacceptable parts of us? And it's it's a difficult thing, but Summer, when you were talking, I was thinking about, on the flip side of it, how much effort and energy we can put into trying to keep these parts of us out of the picture, and basically denying these parts of us, and that we can go years and years and years of our lives basically saying, I shouldn't be this way, I shouldn't have these thoughts, I shouldn't have these feelings, and feeling like instead, there's a certain way that we need to be okay. And I think that the effect of that over time is that we we get smaller, and we kind of become, in some ways, more fragile human beings. We become less resilient because there's more things that kind of push up against us in ways that we don't like. And I guess what I want to say is that it can be a really difficult road to open these things up, but it is a road that brings us deeper into life, gives us access to authenticity, gives us access to fulfillment, to happiness, to being able to love more. So even though it can seem almost inaccessible, I think that we kind of acknowledge what it can offer us.
Yeah, and this is important, Damon, because it's very hard, it's very challenging to invite these aspects of ourselves and to look them in, and to really be with them. However, I mean, the implication, if we don't do that, they're going to be institutionalized inside of us. They're going to go within, and it's going to be self-destructive, right? So this is inner violence. And eventually, something is going to be acted out or projected, and it's going to be an outer violence. So this is how, when we don't really pay attention to what's happening in the moment, and Jason uses the word all the time, meeting reality as it is. If we don't meet life in each moment as it's happening with us, they're not going to go away by themselves. They are going to devolve eventually into war within and war on the outside. So this is what we call about lost opportunities in our life. We lose our opportunity to meet our full humanity and to meet our brothers and sisters outside as human beings as well. And so then we have this kind of estranged, like we become strangers to ourselves and to others. And this is I feel that the origin of evil, of violence, of conflict, of war, whatever we name it. It comes from not really looking after ourselves in that way. And this is not easy. This takes a lot of courage and commitment and strength, but we just owe it to ourselves. We can receive support. We can, ask for help.
Like this concept that you throw out about, I don't know the words that you just used, but that we become kind of alienated from ourselves. So I think this is kind of a pandemic. I think that, so I talk to a lot of people who they reach a point in their life where they say, like, I kind of don't know who I am anymore. It's like they've identified in certain ways with certain maybe outside things, but that relationship with what's going on inside of them is quite limited, and it ends up that they have this feeling like, I don't know who I am. I don't have that sort of authentic feeling of being connected to the world from the inside out. And I think that it's easy to keep that at bay for a while. Life is very busy. We can go on with our jobs, our families, what we're trying to accomplish. And it's very easy to kind of keep it at bay. But there's points where I think that it starts to creep back in, and maybe it's that people reach a certain point in their life, but they can't kind of keep it to the side as much anymore. And, I personally think that can be a great point in life, because in some ways it's like there's an opportunity to be able to reconnect with the self and reconnect with the inner world, and maybe start to live life a little bit differently.
Absolutely. It reminds me of what Tim was saying about, the idealized definitions of what enlightenment is and all of that. And what you're saying now, Damon, is really to really awaken to our reality, to awaken in our life. And is basically we have to awaken to every part of ourselves. So awakening is not something that okay, now life is, it's not a purification path. Like, like now life is perfect and complete and there are no problems. And that will never happen. That will never happen. But what can happen is a delightful way of being in life by meeting it as it is. So we wake up to to everything that's inside of us, maybe for the first time. Because the problem is that we think that if we give those aspects of ourselves a place to exist and to be located, that they're gonna take over our being, and we forget that that is the nutritious part actually in our being. We're talking about how conflict could be nutritious. If everything in life is feeding us, really is supporting us, this is how life should be. So everything should be nutritious. Conflict is a feature of life. And if we don't see if you don't want to name, if you don't feel it in our heart that it is nutritious, it is a fertilizer. It's a fertilizer that helps my being grow. It's a fertilizer for the soul of my being, So nothing is not working with my being. Nothing is not nutritious for my being, whether we say it's a nutrient or whether we say it's a fertilizer, and however we want to put it, it's always a catalyst to move us forward in our life, to support us grow and and blossom. So when we treat with those conflicting parts of ourselves in this way, they take they have a different role in our life. Paradoxically, they would allow for more spaciousness. They would allow for more aliveness. More, our body would stay pulsating, and that's the natural rhythm of ourself. So
it sounds like we have to go through a period of disillusionment of what we think life is actually like, and somehow do that non-dual thing where we include everything. And so part of what we're talking about is how when we miss these opportunities to meet the conflicts within ourselves, it absolutely devolves into war, and it gets externalized into some of the horrible things that we see in the world. So if we can somehow awaken to the parts of ourselves that we've exiled, we're making a huge leap for healing ourselves and healing the world. And Andrew Sam Newman in the chat here, he says, I'm reminded of Jason's discussion on primary pain and secondary suffering. If we argue or fight against the fact that conflict exists, then we create secondary suffering. Whereas if we befriend conflict, we can work directly with the discomfort that comes with it. That's well said.
Beautifully said. Yes.
Yeah. We also have another question. Miriam says, after quite a struggle, I can see there is no creation, no manifestation without war and imperfection. But still, I long to be a healing presence. Are they opposites that are not actually opposites? What do you think?
First thing I want to say is that I think that the longing for it not to be there, for the suffering, for the conflict, I think that is human, right? Like we all want that. We all want to feel better. We all want to feel happy. We all want to be okay. So the desire for it, I think, is baked into us. So I don't think that ever goes away. I think that if you didn't have that desire, we wouldn't even have things like healing. We wouldn't even have the impulse to, what it is that we want more of in our life. So first of all, I think that's a great point. I guess in some ways you could say that I guess in some ways that you could say that in itself kind of creates healing. So it's almost like the desire when you experience or you feel in you or you see in the world, what you wish was different. That in itself actually feels like the creative force or the impulse towards the medicine, which is the healing or the willingness to work with what's difficult. I think it takes a leap of faith, though. I'm just thinking about I'm thinking about this for a minute, and I'm thinking about myself, and I'm thinking about myself in, I'll take a risk, but in relationship. And when I come up against something in me that feels very scary, like at first I feel like maybe it shouldn't even exist. And it can be very, very hard to come to it, to the point where like I feel like I'm taking a huge risk with my spouse. But what I've learned is that if I decide instead to move towards it, move towards what feels scary, and learn about it, and then to communicate it, that for instance, needs inside of me that I might be sharing with my loved one, that I feel it's like, to me, that can feel like very scary, vulnerable territory. This is where I can get hurt. But instead, by sharing it, what I've done is I've created this whole new opportunity for something to be born. That if I hadn't taken this risk, if I hadn't been willing to basically move towards what felt like conflict inside of me and express it, I would never have created this whole new opportunity for connection, for communication, for something new to kind of be born between us. Never would have had a chance.
It sounds like once we awaken to these parts of ourselves and include them in a new way, we're up against an edge, one of our edges, and we're sort of in relationship. We're in that interface between the known and the unknown, and we don't know exactly where it's going to lead, but we do know that we'll be laying down the track as we walk it by including what we need to include. Does that sound right?
Yeah, something came to me as you're talking, like commenting on Damon and what you're saying, Tim. It really takes practice so that we don't really kind of skip a step. It takes a lot of resilience. We need to wrestle. It's not easy to include those aspects of ourselves. And the thing that what happens is that we're after freedom. We want to be free. So now here's the change of perspective. How can we be free with everything that's happening to me? How can I be free with everything that's conflicting within me, or what's happening in the world? So this is our power, if I want to put it that way. This is our strength, is that if I can be free with life as it is, with whatever is happening. Because if you think about it for a moment, if I want to be free from, which is our tendency, we want to be free from everything, right? From all these problems and whatever is going on. This is war, because we are cutting off reality. We are splitting off, aspects of reality. As long as I'm using the word, I want to be free from something, it's an invitation for war. It's an invitation for, war is a big word, but needless conflict, secondary suffering, as Andrew was talking about it. So this is the shift. It takes a leap of faith, as you were saying, Damon. This is the shift in our perspective of how can we be in life the way it is and still we be free and move towards our desires and needs and all of that. That's really possible.
I think that's a really good point, because just like we need to redefine our relationship to conflict, we also need to redefine what freedom actually means. Because so many people end up splitting their lives, and they put a value judgment on, say, conflict or no conflict, and they choose one or the other as to how to move through their life. And what we're saying is both need to be included, in the process. And we can't be splitting our lives and then moving in one direction, because by doing that, we're denying a whole half of reality. And that whole half of reality has so many possibilities, has so much potential, has so much more room for kindness and other acts to come forward. So we need to be awake. We need to be awake to the fact that we're doing this. You know, there's a
Yeah,
quote.
well,
I'm sorry, you go for it, Damien.
yeah. Well, what you said just, for a moment, I'm not going to go really into this, but for a moment I had, political thoughts, and I was thinking about just the polarization in the political environment, and, how it's obviously rampant across the world right now, where there's a lot of people that very staunchly believe in their position. My position is right, and, the other position is wrong. And it's like, only their little piece of reality can be okay, or can even be real. Like it's like the other piece is almost dehumanized. Like whatever it is that they think and they feel, that can't even be real. And, so I'm thinking as you're saying this, oh my gosh, like how small the world has become because of this. Instead of when we can have maybe intelligent conversations with each other, and we can try to like work through difficult issues and see the humanness in them, and like figure out like, okay, like we disagree, but fundamentally we're human and we have the same desires and we have the same fears. So maybe we could like start with that and try to like have some sort of a dynamic engagement instead of just like and that's it. And this is like, you can go all day about this, but, I think it's a pretty big, arena that you could certainly think about this in.
I think it is. And I think that's really a beautiful point, and such a way to bring this whole concept right back down to earth in a very practical way. Just the idea of how small the world has become is profound, because it's impossible to have a conversation with some people. You can't even relate as humans because you're so busy defending your own position and defending the rightness of that and the wrongness of everything else, and not letting it in to, like as Summer says, to nourish you, to make you think in a broader way, and in a way that includes more people, and can actually, be the thing that helps to prevent conflict from devolving into a war.
What you're saying, Beth, reminds me of also another important point, that we fail to acknowledge that we're all different. And the beauty of life lies in us being so different from each other. I mean, existence happens because we're different. We're separate individuals, but still in the midst of that difference, we're all interrelated. And with our humanity, with our, we have our own shared human condition. But the failure to recognize our differences is what makes our world very limited, very small. And then we want to make the other in our own image. We want to make the life in our own image, and hence this becomes like it's an effort that's directed in a wrong place, instead of having, as you said, an open dialogue together, and space for each. They don't have to be our friends or our spouses or anybody, but there's a space for everyone to exist, in life.
Takes some work to get that level of compassion and kindness towards ourselves, wouldn't you say?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a question in the chat. Let's see if I can make some sense of it. It says, when conflict, is there a good guy and a bad guy, or a good position and a not so good position? Let's say you want to be honest, and at the same time, you're willing to cheat to get ahead. If so, is the conflict resolution or discussion actually awaiting for the good to prevail?
I mean, my first impulse towards that is, not to get like super psychological, but like, what is the part that's willing to cheat to get what you want, and instead of saying that that's wrong or bad, maybe start with that and say, what is that about? Like, what is that willingness about? You know, it could be about not wanting to do the hard work. It could be about not believing that abundance is available to you. It could be about, it could be about a lot of things, but instead of saying that's wrong or bad, you know, it's almost like I'm saying, I'm curious, you know, I'm curious about, and so I think this is sort of well, instead of just dismissing that part right out, you know, which you could certainly do, saying, well, let's find out more about that, and see what it has to offer, you know, and then right away I say, well, gosh, that could actually be nourishing, you know, as you were saying, to like learn that about myself, like that I might have that tendency. Mm-hmm. So that's a thought.
I agree with what you're saying, Damon, because I feel that the fact that was mentioned is a great place, that it was given a place and location, that there's this tendency to cheat, or there's this willingness to cheat. And from there, it's exactly what Damon is saying. It has opened up a place within that person for curiosity, for exploration. It's not really a place where we say this is wrong or this is right, as much as to acknowledge that aspect of ourselves and look deeper into it. And because if the person is writing this, there is something behind it. There's something underneath it. There's this always hunger for reality to show up in a different way for them. Otherwise, they would not have mentioned it.
Beth, any comment before we move on?
You can tell it's the wheels are. And I don't want to go off on a limb here, but what I got from that question was, is there an objective thing as far as right and wrong? And I mean, to do this without that. And that's sort of I don't want to say low stakes thing, but it kind of, you know, but what about when we get to other things? As in, well, I have a desire to, you know, annex a country that's not mine. Now it's it's kind of a bigger thing. And yes, there is some of the same principles still apply. If you want to look through, okay, well, why is that, you know, all of this? But at the end of the day, there are some things that are wrong. Not to say that they should not be engaged with or looked into deeply and held compassionately. But that's just where my thinking is when I heard that question. Is there an objective, you know, right or wrong? What do you think?
I'd love just to comment on that, Beth. I agree with you 100%. So what I'm hearing is that we're still human, and we still need to be willing to take a stance, and it's still okay to have preferences. And it's like, in fact, I would go, you know, a step and say that as we're able to kind of like understand the conflict inside of us, in some ways, it frees us up to actually take a cleaner stance in the world. Mm-hmm. We're actually able to say, no, that's not okay. You know, but not from maybe as much of a distorted position as I might have said it, you know, if I didn't have this kind of relationship with myself. But it's like, it can be just sort of cleaner. Like, mm-hmm. This really is not okay. But it definitely, we don't want to get rid of that human aspect.
Right. You can't really.
So there's another question. How can I be free with the conflict within me? Very simple.
My first thought about it is first the conflict, like it looks like something overwhelming, like to say just conflict. It has to be several things that causing a conflict. But let's say the word conflict itself. The only way to be free with it is to acknowledge it, is to embrace it, is to let it be, to be with it, to give it a place, to hug it, sleep with it, eat with it. You know, this is the only way you can be free with conflict, is by totally including it. Not with a notion that I'm going to do that so that I can get rid of it. This doesn't work that way. That it has its righteous place and it's as precious as any other aspect of you. You know, when it's given its rightful place, it kind of returns to its original face, its original shape, its original life force. This is how it works. Anything that you give, you allow to exist as it is. And it brings that movement, that pulsation, that vibration within it. And that's how it starts to act as a nutrient in our being, instead of being something against my being, something that is attacking my being, or something that I want to, that's toxic or something. It really shifts gears here when we do it this way.
So again, sort of redefining what freedom is. When we include the conflict, you know, freedom can feel like a messy, confusing, intense life. You know, and a lot of times we have our ideas of freedom that don't look like that at all, but that can lead to a certain kind of unreality. If we're not including these conflicts, it can lead to an unreality that sort of clouds our thinking. And that eventually leads to what we were talking about earlier, an institutionalized way of being, something that gets externalized in some of the great wars that we see out in the world. So I think it's a great point, Summer.
Thank you. The only freedom is to be totally with life as it is. Totally, as it is in every moment. This is the ultimate freedom. Otherwise, where are we going to go? I mean, is there some edge outside of life or something? It's like really we mess up with ourselves, you know, and we all do it all the time, because this is part of our humanity. So it's not like an error. It's not like we have failed ourselves. We all forget this, and there's something. It's a condition that's set in us, right? But we are all wired to awaken to this truth, to this ultimate reality. Like it's in us. It's in each of us, that we are wired to awaken to the truth of what life is and what reality is.
It does make me think, and I'll just share this, because I think that, and this is not what you're saying, but I think that it's easy sometimes for people to hear that and say, does this mean that you're condoning, you know, for instance, bad behavior or acting out, you know, or things that, again, to tie into kind of like what you were saying, Beth, like what maybe are not okay. And of course, you're not saying that. You know, what you're offering up is you're offering up that it's really, this is more of an inner position. This is more of an inner relationship. This is more of a, you know, you're suggesting kind of a different radical way of being with what is inside of us, so that we're not, you know, getting rid of it. We're actually having more of a relationship with it. Does not mean that like we're saying, okay, so, you know, but I can now take this out on somebody or act this out, and that means that it's okay. In fact, it's the opposite. It's like by being able to have a deeper relationship with, you know, what we have inside of us that, quite frankly, can be very difficult. If we're really willing to go all the way with it, it really brings it back to us. And we find that, you know, what that does is that actually makes us more free in the relationships that we have with other people. We don't have to take it out on the other person to be okay. It's like, in fact, it sort of gives us our power back. So I want to like kind of acknowledge that, because I know as I talk about this sometimes, that's an easy misconception that people can have when they hear about this stuff.
Exactly, Damon. But that's always going to be the first step, always, that whatever is happening in the world outside, we always have to first check how we're feeling about it, how we're thinking about it. And by reframing the relationship we have with what's happening on the outside, give us a totally different position of how we're going to act in the world, and how we're going to decide, and how we're going to choose. Because then we're still going to choose. We are entitled for our preferences and our ideas and all of that. But then our choice does not reject what we're not choosing. Our choice is not against something else. Our choice doesn't come out of fear. It's a choice that we're just feeling moved towards in the moment. So it's the place we're seated from when we're taking these decisions and choices is a different place. And I'm not saying it's going to be a perfect choice or a perfect decision. We're going to still make mistakes, but we are more conscious and we're more awake to our actions and our deeds. And maybe if we make mistakes, we can go back and apologize or take responsibility for our mistakes or whatever, But it's a more conscious interaction and a conscious engagement with reality.
Yeah, part of this conscious engagement, it's being awake to the fact that, we may have had an idea of peace that doesn't include conflict and war. So we had some there to eventually get to. And now what we're doing is we're bringing it back to ourselves. And we're saying that the healing journey is actually to see conflict at the beginning, moment to moment. And that's a really difficult thing to be with. So not only do you need that kindness and that compassion for yourself, which inevitably gets brought out into the world, but I was just thinking how important it is to have other people in your community or friends, people to rely on to help support us while we're doing this work. It's so important. So I just wanted to bring that in because having friends on the spiritual path can really help.
Well, I mean, our community in the Society of Soul is an ongoing nourishment, as you know, because we will forget, and we need our friends to remind us, and we need somebody to listen to us. Being human is not like we're going to get it perfect all the way and that's done, like it's a finished product. Never. We sleep and wake up tomorrow and we have to, like we go again and make our mistakes or forget. And so we need always reminders. We need helpers along the way, because Jason says it in one place. I can't really remember the quote, but it's like our friends are our sails that lets our ship move forward in life. So we definitely need that. We can never do this alone.
I have a question for you. Oh, Beth, please.
No, I was just going to say that doing things alone sometimes is what gets us into trouble. Trying to work on conflict on our own, something that's bigger than what we can handle. So much of I think what the problems are amongst people with relationships is just that we do tend to want to do so much on our own and by ourselves and in isolation. So the idea that you really need other people, a community, someone who is engaged in a similar type of work. It's really the only way to go forward in a healthy way.
Absolutely. And I'm not sure if this will come out right, but when I think about this topic, how to live with conflict, I think about, we're very lucky to have this community that we have. we're very fortunate to have friends and companions that we can wrestle with ourselves in front of, and they can be present to us as we do that, and they don't have to like tell us how to fix it or change it. It's like but like in a lot of the world, people don't have that, right? But I think about this sometimes, and I think, gosh, maybe if people are willing to take a little bit of a risk sometimes, and like you might be at work and you can see that somebody shows up, and today is just different. They're heavier. They're quieter. They're not having, their personality is a little bit different today. A lot of times we just let that go. We go about our business. And maybe it could just be as simple as somebody saying, hey, how are you doing? I noticed something's a little different today. What's going on? And it's just that little bit of like being willing to reach out and connect to somebody just a little bit differently. I do it with strangers sometimes. You just like, is everything okay? And it's like, we just want to stay in our own little world. But if we can just like these little moments of saying basically like, really what we're saying is, in this moment, I'm putting a little bit of value on what might be going on inside of you, and what a gift. If we could just like try to do that in little ways with each other, I think it can make a big difference. Anyway, I think that came out, but yeah.
I love what you're saying, Damon. It's just, I want to say something. It's just so beautiful what you're saying. It's a great reminder of how we go out every day and think of ourselves as a human being meeting another human being, whoever that human being is, a stranger, somebody we never met, and just to have that idea in our head as we wake up, and this is a human being waking up now, and it's just, this is I'm meeting the world, with other human beings, even the other human beings who push our button, who are the cause of our conflict, who are, everyone at the end of the day is a human being that if we met at that level, something else can happen.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I have a question for each of you, if you feel like answering. How has this consciousness that we're talking about here, this non-dual approach to conflict, how has it helped you in your personal lives?
I'll share.
This is a big question. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead, Damon.
So I did start to share this a little bit ago, but for me, identifying my needs and desires has been hard as a human being. Like knowing that, being able to like give voice to that and like own that, like on a big level, sure, but like on a one-on-one level, it felt scary, risky, like territory that I didn't know. So doing some work on it, being able to learn what that is, and then in some ways feeling like, again, inside it can feel very risky, like it's unfamiliar territory. So it's not like it's like, oh, you figure it out and then it gets easy. It's like, no, it actually feels difficult to do. But but taking the risk and communicating that from a authentic place with my spouse without needing anything from her to fix that inside of me. So I was fulfilling something in me by basically like learning about this and learning how to communicate it. What was unexpected was how it landed in that person. And basically that it touched off something completely unexpected that set her on her own journey of self-exploration and opening, and created a whole new avenue of connection between us. So there was a whole thing that took place that I never could have foreseen. And it was because I was willing to, kind of like what we were saying before, like come up against what felt so scary inside of me, wrestle with it, give it words, figure out how to communicate it. And then this whole new possibility was born because of it.
Beautiful. I think it speaks to the process that we're in and the creative possibilities, bringing this consciousness to our lives. Anybody else feel like sharing their answer? We just have a few minutes left.
Yeah, I'm going to be very brief about it. It's a major shift. It's a major shift that happened to me, and the most important part of that shift is it taught me how to be kind to myself. I mean, this is the ultimate thing. If we know how to be, I'm going to talk personally, to really be kind to myself, to give space for myself, has been informing every relationship in my life, with my family, my friends, at work, everywhere. Because for me, this is the foundational aspect of anyone, of any being, but it's the foundational aspect of my being, because that's what every day I come back to. And I need to remind myself, up till now, up till today, it's like push the refresh button every day, how to stay kind to myself. And I feel this is a great gift that anyone can give to anybody. So I'm ever grateful, because this work has given this to me.
So I think that's a great place to end, because we're out of time. I'm sorry, Beth.
That's okay. I need to jump in, more quickly.
It's fine. I just want to make sure we respect everybody's time today. And just a final note, the Foundation for Non-Duality survives on your donations. So anything that you can provide, big or small, would be greatly appreciated. And we love you all. Thanks for being a part of this. Goodbye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
This is 25 people.